Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Great America Show. Great to have you with us, as always. Speaker Mike Johnson getting bailed out this week by his people, the Marxist Dems. In a joint statement, House Democratic leaders said, quote, "At this moment, upon completion of our national security work," think about that, they've completed the national security work, "the time has come to turn the page on this chapter of pro-Putin Republican obstruction. We'll vote to table Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene's motion to vacate the chair if she does invoke the motion. It will not succeed," declared Hakeem Jeffries, leader of the Marxist Dems pack in the House. So now it's clear what Mike Johnson traded off for that $95 billion foreign aid package, you remember. Johnson now stays in power until at least, January of 2025. Come then, however, Johnson definitely needs to be gone. And Marxists on college campuses all across the country continuing their rioting, their absolutely anti-Semitic protest, their anti-Israel protest, anti-America protest. Students at Columbia University in New York last night starting an insurrection at the university. I said insurrection, didn't I? Protesting Israel, protesting the United States. And then they smashed windows and stormed buildings as law enforcement sat and watched. Check it out. I wonder if FBI Director Chris Wray has any informants on the ground there, any of his agents or information sources monitoring the situation, just as he did on January 6th. Our guest today is Congressman Dan Snider. He's the vice president of media watchdog group, Media Research Center. And now here is Dan Snider. And Dan, first of all, thanks for being with us. It's good to see you. And let's talk about this trial in New York to begin with against the President of the United States. It has gone on. Every legal mind I'm aware of who is in any way a leading professor, a leading attorney, has said that this is a mockery, what is happening in this this Manhattan courtroom. Your thoughts?
Yeah, Lou, you know that I used to practice law in the New York court system. So I'm familiar with the procedures and the operations of it. The idea that Alvin Bragg, the Soros-backed district attorney Alvin Bragg, would bring, 36 felony charges against Trump when, if you sort of look honestly at the facts, what could he have brought? Well, maybe a misdemeanor charge or two, for business records, but even the state was not at all harmed by that. These are like jaywalking charges that that a legitimate attorney could have brought, but instead, 37 felony indictments. This is just bizarre, and of course it's well documented now that the judge is also a politician, a politicized figure who's given money to Joe Biden, and his daughter makes money. Everybody knows the facts here. It really is damaging to our entire system of government that one of the most important branches of our system, our judicial system, has been so corrupted.
Well, the question then becomes, why is it that no one in the New York appellate courts, no one in the Supreme Court of New York, the judiciary has not come down like a ton of bricks on Alvin Bragg and Judge Merchant? Because what is interesting here is the American people right now by a vast majority know and say that this is all politically motivated. And what we're watching is the dismantling, as far as I'm concerned, of the integrity, the trust in the New York judiciary. New York looks like a bunch of rubes, fools, and charlatans as well. This is the most rigged judiciary, in my opinion, now, outside of the D.C. federal courts that we've witnessed so far.
Yeah, the left is always so good at using the rules that the rest of us live by and turning those rules against us. Right. So, when can a party appeal? Well, it depends on the issue, but basically procedural motions, of the sort you're describing, have to wait until after a trial is over, under the law. And so the president is really caught in a tough predicament. It's a predicament created by the left, obviously for political purposes. In the end, a small number of Manhattan voters showed up at the polls to elect Alvin Bragg, this radicalized prosecutor. In some respects, this sits on the shoulders of all those New Yorkers who allowed this guy to get put in office. A radicalized Marxist kind of person who's going to use the power of the police state to attack his political opponents.
And when will anyone in the judiciary, the state of New York, the state of Georgia, perhaps the Supreme Court, when will they intercede? When will they intervene? Because, as you say, the rules of procedure call for someone to be hanging by a rope after the fact, and instead of cutting down that rope. This is absolutely, on its face, barbaric, what we're witnessing. And for there to be a procedural, some sort of suddenly we're worshiping at the book of procedure, rather than the Bible, you name it, the Ten Commandments. There should be in this somewhere room for decency, and in New York there is no room for decency.
Well, you've just hit on a thread I was going to go down when you mentioned the Ten Commandments. Our First Amendment is comprised of 5 elements, one of which is freedom of the press, another is freedom of speech.
Right.
Freedom of speech was recognized as a God-given right and enshrined in our Constitution, recognizing that right is inherent to us as human beings. Freedom of the press, there was no belief that was a God-given right. Instead, it was a practical understanding that the press has a role in our system of government to hold the powerful accountable, whether the powerful are incumbents in government or the powerful are university presidents. So ordinarily, the press would be doing its job. When there's some radicalized prosecutor, the press would be putting a spotlight on that radical prosecutor, putting pressure on that radical prosecutor, and those prosecutors would then back off, knowing if they persisted, they could be impeached, lose their jobs, come under ethics charges. But our media, ABC, NBC, CBS, NPR, Washington Post, New York Times, etc., they have not only defended Alvin Bragg, they've declared him a hero. Where's the media in all of this? Because look, in the end, the media has decided that Donald Trump must not be reelected, and they are using this same system for their political aims and goals.
And that's all well and good. But the reality is we come back to the court system and to the prosecutorial system in the state of New York. Mm-hmm. This is out of control. It's one thing for them to be, I always get a kick out of quaint expressions. There's a 2-tiered system of justice in this country. That's balderdash. We don't have a justice system right now. Mm-hmm. I get a kick out of the people who said they put their thumbs on the scales of justice. They're using a sledgehammer on the scales of justice. And no one is taking leadership, taking responsibility to intercede to stop the political persecution of a president that is now in its 9th year, whether it be from the FBI, the Department of Justice, the intelligence communities, whether it be state jurisdictions, whether it be local jurisdictions. It is all orchestrated and driven from the center. which is the Marxist Dems who lead the Democrat Party and the deep state. We're talking with the Media Research Center's Daniel Snider, and we'll be right back. Stay with us.
Folks, did you know that over 90% of the pharmaceuticals in America are not made here? We saw during the China virus pandemic what happens when we are dependent on other countries like China and India for our most critical pharma needs. Recent clusters of respiratory illness have been popping up around the world, and in the United States, it's dominating the headlines. It's also shedding light on the need to be prepared for an unexpected medical emergency. Will you have what your family needs when the next crisis hits? Our good friends Dr. Peter McCullough and Dr. Drew Pinsky over at The Wellness Company have just what you need with The Wellness Company's medical emergency kits. These kits include 8 life-saving medications with drugs like amoxicillin, Z-Pak, and ivermectin for you to keep on hand, along with a guidebook for safe use. From tick bites to COVID to extreme bioterror events, every scenario is covered. Go to twc.health/Dobbs and grab your medical emergency kit right now. Don't wait until you need it. Take control of your health today with the Wellness Company's medical emergency kits.
We're back now. We're talking with Media Research Center's Dan Snider. And Dan, you were part of the transition team for Donald Trump in 2016 and 17. Yeah. Give us your sense of just where things went off the rails, if I can put it in somewhat, I don't think that's hyperbolic. I mean, it went off the rails. We had Chris Christie, the governor of New Jersey, leading the transition, who was a rhino. And and suddenly he's an absolute opposition to the guy he's supposed to be helping, that is President Donald Trump. That moment was the basis for a lot of mistakes that followed through in the administration. That is, the selection of people who were not appropriate for the roles they took and who actually were fighting this president.
Yeah, some of the assets that President Trump brought to the table is that he didn't know how Washington worked, and he was willing to break glass and knock down doors to get his stuff done. But that was also his weakness, not knowing the town, not knowing how things operated, who to trust. I was on transition. I oversaw the appointments to several agencies initially. When I say appointments, the selection of candidates during transition, that all, of course, shifted to the White House as soon as President Trump was sworn into office. But I had a couple really important rules that I gave the leadership of the transition team. Number one, do not keep any Obama holdovers. And I cautioned them, you're going to be told that there are some people who are mission critical, and until their replacements can be formally nominated and confirmed by the Senate, you've got to keep them. And I implore them, under no uncertain terms, can you keep any of these people. Find career bureaucrats to make as acting. And that was my first rule. And those folks didn't understand that, and they kept Obama's deputy attorney general in place. And of course, she then orchestrated the whole Russia hoax thing. Mm-hmm. My second rule was, whoever you select.
What was her name?
Oh, I'm forgetting. She was Obama's deputy attorney general, and she was in that acting role for about 2 weeks, long enough to work her magic to create the impression that Donald Trump and the incoming attorney general had broken the law, working with Russians in advance and all that nonsense.
Yeah. It's also, to me, interesting that there was so much confusion within the president's team, whether it be Jeff Sessions, whether it be Chris Christie, you name it, the people who were seemingly there for him, and who then, just as seemingly, looked to be in just absolute counterpoint to him.
Yeah,
do you see any sign that things are much, much better this time as we approach Election Day?
Look, Donald Trump made a lot of mistakes early on in his administration with regard to the selection of people for senior roles, and he's learned a lot. And so I think that if he's reelected, he's going to do a better job selecting people early on for those roles. And
Do you know whether or not, and I don't know this, and I guess I know the president fairly well. We're friends, but I don't really know what preparations he's making for the White House that I believe he will take back, and the country better pray he takes it back. But I don't know how much thoughts right now is going to, and energy going to, because of the campaign naturally, to how he's going to staff out that second term. Do you have any idea?
Well, I would hope that Donald Trump himself is spending zero time thinking about people to serve in his administration. He needs to focus on.
I'm talking about staffing up the people and working with groups, think tanks, whomever it may be, to really have some significant work done for the transition before there's a transition.
Yeah. So there are two groups that are really focused on this right now. The Heritage Foundation is leading a coalition effort with lots of conservative groups, and I think that's an unprecedented effort. In the past, some of these organizations have come up with stacks of resumes, but those stacks have not been helpful largely. The Heritage Foundation and others are working much more diligently and carefully and strategically to do that. But then there's also the think tank that's connected to Donald Trump, that's comprised mostly of sort of the loyal members of his administration. So both of these efforts should put the president in good stead if he were to get reelected.
Yeah, one hopes, and the Heritage, working with him famously for his list of justices for the Supreme Court. I mean, all I think of is now Amy Coney Barrett, and what a disappointment she is, and what she turned out to be. It is really breathtaking to see, if you will, a big miss like that, and a miss that we can't afford, frankly, to make again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really hard to screen these intellectuals, who are right of center judges, because it's, look, they're super smart, and I used to practice law. I was not one of these brainiac, super smart lawyers, and I'm kind of proud of that. I've only known a couple of these super smart lawyers who actually have political savvy at all. And so much of these hot button issues require not just an academic reading of the law and the text, but also an understanding of real implications to society. And that's where so many of these fuzzy-headed brainiacs just go wrong.
I love the way you call them super smart and brainiacs, because scholars of the group, I guess the only one I would consider, frankly, a scholar is Gorsuch, frankly, of the three that he brought in, Kavanaugh and Barrett. Smart, but super smart, I'm not so sure. And savvy, I know that she is not, and Kavanaugh has been just worked over. I mean, the man has been, it's just awful the way he's been treated by the left. And one can't imagine them not being, to some margin, intimidated by the mobs that Schumer sent over to rattle them and to intimidate them. And then Kavanaugh going through what he did with actually an assassin in his neighborhood ready to kill him.
Yeah.
And then you think, well, wait a minute. These people have experienced this. Why in the world are they not seeing with clear eyes precisely what the Marxist Dems have done to them and are doing to the country? Because it's as vivid as it could be, possibly be, for anyone. And we're going to take that up and more as we continue with Dan Snider, Media Research Center, Great American. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Folks, did you know that over 90% of the pharmaceuticals in America are not made here? We saw during the China virus pandemic what happens when we are dependent on other countries like China and India for our most critical pharma needs. Recent clusters of respiratory illness have been popping up around the world, and in the United States, it's dominating the headlines, It's also shedding light on the need to be prepared for an unexpected medical emergency. Will you have what your family needs when the next crisis hits? Our good friends Dr. Peter McCullough and Dr. Drew Pinsky over at the Wellness Company have just what you need with the Wellness Company's medical emergency kits. These kits include 8 life-saving medications with drugs like amoxicillin, Z-Pak, and ivermectin for you to keep on hand, along with a guidebook for safe use. From tick bites to COVID to extreme bioterror events, every scenario is covered. Go to twc.health/Dobbs and grab your medical emergency kit right now. Don't wait until you need it. Take control of your health today with the Wellness Company's medical emergency kits.
We're back now with the Media Research Center's Dan Snider. And Dan, let's go to this issue, if we may, real quickly. This is a country that is watching the media fail. It's watching, and by the way, when I say fail, I mean it fails the American people.
Yeah.
It's succeeding by its own measures, certainly the corporate measures in this country. We see corporations, Facebook, as you and the Media Research Center have chronicled. I mean, overwhelming interventions in the elections in this country since 2020. It's difficult for me to imagine why it's not clear, as vivid and stark what a threat corporate power is in this country, and what has been and how that power has been used, particularly against Donald Trump, for crying out loud, against our political system.
Yeah, Lou, I'll just say that you're the first person to sort of open my eyes about the threat of corporate America, big corporations. For so long, the idea of for-profit corporations, conservatives saw that as corporations as allies, as good things. And it used to be that these corporate CEOs usually were kind of right of center and pro-freedom, and that's no longer the case. And so now these big corporations are controlled by the left, and those resources are being used to attack the idea of America, the very founding principles of our democracy. And the worst among all of them, of course, are the big tech platforms. A few weeks ago, we released our big Google study showing how Google swayed anywhere from 6 to 8 million votes and interfered in our elections 41 times in really dramatic and significant ways, including burying all the Republican presidential campaign websites, except for Will Hurd, who never broke 1% in the polls. And now we've just released our latest big tech study on Facebook, showing how it has interfered in elections 39 times in recent years, especially in 2020.
And to think that so many people in the country, and of course most of them are on the left, they're Marxist, they're leftist, far left, for them not to understand this is really being hidebound to an ideology and sacrificing their reason, their powers of comprehension and perception. This is not complicated, really. When you look at the centers of power in our society, that's the federal government and corporate America. You don't have to look much beyond that, do you?
Yeah. There's a reason our founding documents begin with "we the people." Under our concept of government, the founders' concept of government, the person is the first unit of government. And today, that's just no longer true.
Yeah.
Big institutions control everything, whether they're governmental institutions or corporate institutions or academic institutions. They're using all of their power to control us. Now, my goodness, Joe Biden and his administration just a month ago in the Supreme Court was arguing that the government and big tech both have First Amendment free speech rights to censor Americans who disagree with the president. I am not making this up. Joe Biden's argument is that government has the right to control our speech.
Yes, and he's not kidding, as the saying goes. He is absolutely asserting that, and the new head of NPR saying that when asked about the First Amendment, this is the woman taking over NPR, tax-funded leftist outlet that it is, saying, it gets kind of tricky with that First Amendment. And it's supposed to get tricky. It's actually supposed to get tricky like a stone wall around each citizen. And instead, it gets tricky. And you could tell that she was, we're talking about globalists, elitists who think somehow they have a God-given right to tell the rest of us exactly what to do, irrespective of our system of government, irrespective of our Constitution, and our heritage and history. It's mind-boggling. And by the way, they've got some idiots completely convinced of that. And they are the people who are the martyrs to DEI, CRT, ESG, and the nonsense of systemic. If you use the word systemic as an adjective, I've noticed for racism, systemic racism, it buys you at least a 40% greater percentage of absolutely credulous fools. And they march off to destroy the republic. That's where we are. Your thoughts about right now, media and what can be done to resurrect even whatever it would take to actually resurrect an objective, active, passionate, patriotic press.
Yeah, and patriotic, again, the role of the media in our society and in our system of government is to hold the powerful accountable. And Lou, I say this, as you were talking, I was trying to think, is this accurate? And it is. There's no journalist in the last 30, 40 years who has been more responsible for fulfilling his or her role under the Constitution than you. I was in the Bush administration for 8 years, and you would just go after us in the Bush administration. You were holding us accountable, but then you did the same thing in the Obama administration,
right.
And you did the same thing during the Trump administration.
Well, thank you for those kind words. And Dan, just for the audience's benefit, I got blackballed by the Republican Bush administration. Then I got blackballed by the Obama Marxist administration. I got fired by CNN, a liberal network, and then I got fired by Fox, a different network. So.
Yeah, because you're doing your job. So, what if I could appoint you czar of the media and say, okay, media, get back to doing your jobs. Look at Lou Dobbs as the example, because he does his job. And again, people don't understand this. The role of journalism is in fact constitutionally, I don't want to say mandated, but there's a constitutional responsibility of the media to hold the powerful accountable. And that's not where we are today in journalism. Today, the great bulk of media are cheerleaders and advocates for left-wing government. Right. And of course, there are plenty of conservative outlets that do the cheering of the right. And we've always had media that's partisan from the start of our nation's founding, but it's always been sort of balanced, equal on the left, equal on the right, with plenty of journalists just doing straight journalism. And today, I can think of like 3 journalists who do what you do. And one of them just got fired by CBS, yes, for doing her job.
Marriage, absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. Great journalist. I have no idea what her politics are. She just does good journalism.
Yeah. And that should be enough for any journalist.
Yeah.
We appreciate it, and I really appreciate your kind words, Dan. Come back soon. We got a republic to save, and thanks for all that you and Media Research Center are doing. Thanks so much for being with us. God bless you. Thanks to Dan Snider, and thank you everybody for being with us today. Be sure to join us this week for the Great America Show. Among our guests are Alex Jones, climate change expert Mark Morano, and intrepid reporter Paul Sperry. And be sure to follow me on Twitter and Truth Social at Lou Dobbs, and on Facebook and Instagram at Lou Dobbs Tonight. And please join us each and every weeknight for Lou Dobbs Tonight, 7 p.m. Eastern, 6 Central on Frank Speech, Rumble, and X, and more platforms as well. Thank you, everybody, for being with us. God bless you, and may God bless